So we'd like to start our session today. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this panel session. Upstart Startups, how a new generation of young Ontario entrepreneurs are scaling up, securing big investments, and attracting international attention. I am Lily Lam, Senior Director of Investment Portfolio at OCE, and I welcome you to this session. I'd like to remind you that if you're tweeting today's session, please use the hashtag OCE Discovery. It's my distinct honor to introduce our moderator for this session, Janet Bannister, General Partner at Real Ventures. Real Ventures is Canada's largest and most active early-stage venture capital firm. Janet's background is a combination of founding and building successful entrepreneurial ventures and making an impact at leading companies such as Procter & Gamble, eBay, McKinsey & Co. Prior to this role, Janet launched Kijiji.ca and grew it to become one of the most visited websites in Canada. And for those of you with kids, we all know that Kijiji is our way of getting rid of all that kid-related stuff that you don't need anymore. Subsequently, she led the Kijiji global business, accelerating growth in North America, Europe, and Asia. Please welcome Janet Bannister.
Okay. So first of all, welcome to this panel. I actually think this is going to be the best panel of the whole two-day session. And I must say I feel honored to be on the stage with this great panel. In front of you, you have some of Canada's best young entrepreneurs in terms of the businesses that they are building and what they're doing. So today we're going to have about 45 minutes of moderated panel discussion, and then we will go to the audience and have about 40 minutes of Q&A from the audience. So you can, if you have any questions for the panel, feel free. There'll be lots of time at the end to ask those questions. This panel today is really going to focus on you as an entrepreneur, the first year or 2 years, what you should be thinking about, what you should be doing, how you overcome some of the challenges in order to plant the seeds to grow and scale a great business. So with that introduction, with that sort of preface, I have the honor of introducing the panel. So first to my left is Katherine. Katherine is the founder of Female Founders, which is an online site dedicated to inspiring and educating the next generation of female angel investors. She also authored an upcoming book entitled Funded, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Raising Your First Round. And prior to that, she founded Shoplocket, which was acquired in 2014 by PCH. Next is Michael Katchen. Michael Katchen is the founder and CEO of Wealthsimple, which is Canada's fastest growing online investment manager. He was recently listed as an industry mover by Financial Post, a change agent by Canadian Business Magazine, and one of the 500 people which will define the next 12 months. Next is Michael Litt, who's the CEO of Vidyard. Michael is the co-founder and CEO of Vidyard, which is the leading video marketing platform. He also serves as the general partner of Garage Capital, which is a seed stage fund focused on supercluster companies, and he also sits on the Communitech Board of Directors in Waterloo. Next up is Blair Livingston. Blair's career spans institutional finance on the sell side and equity sales and trading at RBC on both Wall Street and Bay Street. And in 2012, Blair founded Contxt. Contxt provides smart, actionable insights, helping to create a more capital-efficient market system. And then I just got to get this here. So we got a bit of a mix up here. And then next is Kurtis McBride. Kurtis is the co-founder and CEO of Miovision. Miovision is a technology company that empowers transportation professionals to improve the transportation experience through data and infrastructure. Kurtis founded Miovision with two classmates while he completed his degree at the University of Waterloo. And then on the end, Nicole. In 2008, Nicole founded Tiburon, an offshore manufacturing business in the Dominican Republic. She also, during the earthquake in Haiti, she founded a nonprofit organization to help with relief efforts. And then in 2012, she launched OMX, or Offset Market Exchange, which is an online marketplace to help government contractors manage their obligations to invest in local Canadian companies. Most recently, she became the newest dragon on CBC's Next Gen Dragon's Den. So again, as you can see, just an amazing group of people who are here. And we're going to go through a bunch of different questions. I think the first set of questions will be around leading a business. Then we'll get into some questions around team building, growing your business, and finally venture funding. So first of all, in terms of leading your business, what are some of the most important things that you need to think about in the first year of your business? Yeah, just jump in, whoever wants to talk.
I think my mic's on.
Yeah, I was gonna.
I can
Check,
start.
I think
check.
it'll go on whenever you're ready to speak.
Can I get a whoop?
Okay, I'll just start with one word, and it's sales.
Okay.
So I think a lot of people, have this idea that you got to sit in the basement and refine the product. And I know this has become very mainstream thinking, but it's definitely sales. So sell something even before you have a product.
Okay. Other thoughts?
How
Mike,
many?
did you have
I was gonna ask how many people here are actually entrepreneurs or founders of startups. Can I get a show of hands? So what do the rest of you do?
Is there anything else?
I don't know. Like service providers, lawyers, accountants.
Do you help entrepreneurs?
Government.
Fund startups?
Investors.
Oh, like angel investors. How many are angel investors?
Or is that government money? Government money.
Government money,
Got it.
okay.
Okie dokie. So we'll talk to the 5 people in the audience here. No, I would agree completely with. I don't need to hold the mic to my face. The 5 people. The comment about sales. For the first year of what was Vidyard's life, we were actually a content production company called Redwoods Media, and we were selling video production services. So completed videos. The cost was $2,500 per minute. It was a grind. My conversion rate on outbound calls was like a fraction of a percent. I believe it was less than 0.1% of all calls I made connected and converted to closed business. And I don't think a lot of people realize the type of volume you need to do to get traction in the early days. But if we didn't make that grind, if we didn't put ourselves out there, we wouldn't have found those early customers. We wouldn't have essentially found the idea for Vidyard from working with those companies. So sales 100%. The reality is customers are the only thing that can really validate what you're doing. And if you're not talking to them, you're not going to be validating your idea, and you could be going down the complete wrong path.
I'd echo that, and I'd also talk about sort of product market fit. When you're selling a product, there's buyer discovery and user discovery. So I think a lot of times you talk about startups who stay in the basement trying to make their product great. They're focused a lot on the user discovery and trying to build a great product that people want to use. But ultimately, until you actually get out in market and run sales processes dozens or hundreds of times, you won't really understand your buyer. And I think it's important if you're gonna, when you're starting, you gotta obviously focus on the user. But I think a lot of startups forget about the buyer who might have completely different needs than the user.
I would just chime in. Like, I think the bigger theme, personally, I wouldn't say it's about like sales or not sales. I think it's talking to users or talking to customers. If you're B2B, it's definitely sales. Like, I would challenge any consumer person to like get out there and like find, but like definitely talking to users. People make assumptions, and the assumption leads to another assumption, and an assumption leads to another assumption, like sitting in their basement or wherever they are. Like for us, getting out talking to users was super important. Like, 80%, but you don't know the other 20% that like kind of ends up being like the secret sauce. And I think it's just like telling everyone your idea. I think there's nothing more amateur than when I meet someone, they're like, oh, I'd love to tell you my idea, but it's like so revolutionary that like I need you to sign an NDA. I'm like, what do you think I'm gonna do? Shut down my company and like steal your company? So I think like just talking to everyone you can the first year, talking to customers, talking to purchasers, talking to users if you're building something consumer facing, and just like having that discussion 10,000 times so that you know it in and out.
Okay. You know what? One thing I'd be interested in getting the panel's discussion on is I often see entrepreneurs who they go out and have an initial conversation with a customer, and a customer will say, hey, well, we like what you're doing, but we want you to add X, Y, Z. So then they go back and add X, Y, Z. And then they go out and talk to customer number 2, and customer number 2 says, well, I like what you're doing, but can you go back and add feature ABC? And then they go back. And I think that often happens when the entrepreneurs are more engineering product focused as opposed to sales focused. And I'd be interested in sort of how you think about minimum viable product. And when do you just keep selling what you're doing, and when do you sort of say, okay, wait, I'm going to stop selling and go back to more development?
I'd say, I mean, that's a really hard problem, and I think all companies continue to face that problem as they scale and have lots more users asking for lots more features and knowing which ones to build. I think when you're starting, the only thing I'd add to what these folks said about sales is knowing how to build a product and how to ship it. And I think starting by understanding like very, very clearly what problem you're solving and knowing what the minimum viable product you have to actually solve that problem would be is really important. And a very quick example is when we launched Wealthsimple, we wanted to launch a digital experience for our clients. So digital onboarding, the first digital onboarding in financial services where you could sign up and fund an account without any massive amounts of paperwork. But we weren't actually able to build the technology to do that day one because none of the banking partners we had to work with actually would enable that. So what we did is we enabled people to sign up on our website, and then every night my co-founder and I would sit down and print off tens and tens of applications, fill them in by hand, and then drive them to our banking partners to be able to actually sign up a website in this, what looked like a digital experience to our clients. And so I think very important to understand the problems you're trying to solve, and then the simplest possible ways that you can solve them with a feature set or a product to get them out.
Okay, great. Katherine, did you want to?
Yeah, one thing I'd add is that oftentimes when you're starting, people don't want to kill your dream, so they're oftentimes going to tell you everything you want to hear, and sometimes, add X, add Y is their way of, kindly saying, I really don't like what you're doing, but maybe this will soften the blow. If it were a little like this, maybe I'd like it. So learning how to have conversations where you'll actually get an honest answer often involves actually not saying, this is the thing I've been working on for a year, do you like it? Because oftentimes you're going to just get yes because they don't want to, really insult you. So how do you actually learn to ask those questions? There's a good book called The Mom Test, and basically the premise is how can you ask questions in a way that even your mom would give you an honest answer, rather than just saying it's the best thing in the world. So I think that learning that in the early days is really important.
Great. Okay. Speaking about early days, we talked about the importance of sales. I'd be interested as you reflect back on the first year of your business, how you spent your time. Like what percentage of a typical day or a typical week would you spend, say, out talking to customers versus doing the other things that are required to do in that first year of your business?
One thing I want to add is about how you spend that first year is be careful who you get into bed with. I think that's the biggest thing. Our first hire ended up being great, but we met 3 people before that first hire, and it's the same with investors. When you are struggling in your mom's basement and you want nothing more than to get a real office, and someone offers you 50 grand as a part of a first angel round, and you're like, yes, I'll take money from anybody, you can make some very bad bedfellows that you will never, ever be able to get rid of without extreme pain. Okay. But to kind of go into that question.
But actually, Blair, if we can pause there, because I think that's a great point. Can you talk a little bit more about sort of the watch-outs and how you know if you're taking money from somebody, from the right type of person?
The biggest red flag I've seen is people who prey on naivety, right? So a lot of Canadian investors don't know. There's a joke in Silicon Valley that's you pick the price, we'll pick the terms. And I think a lot of sharkish investors pick terms that the average or first-time entrepreneur wouldn't understand. Liquidation preference is a great one. I bet you most entrepreneurs in the audience don't understand what a liquidation preference is, or maybe they do and they're super educated, I don't know. But it's one of those things that there's no upfront pain of a 5x liquidation preference. But when you've raised $10 million and your company sells for $50 million, all of a sudden you get nothing. And I think it's very important to understand the terms and use those terms as red flags. And then references is my other big thing, always ask.
Yeah, I would echo that, having been someone who didn't know and went through it and then paid the price on the back end. All those terms that are in there have an economic equivalent, and if you eventually want to get yourself out from under liquidation preference or a put right, or a dividend that's accruing in your share, ultimately what you thought was a great valuation, when 5 years goes by and you're bringing in new money and you need to clean up all of those old rights, they can really cost you a lot on your cap table. So yeah, totally echo that.
And I think the mark of a great investor is someone who wants to own a part of your company and is not as worried about price because they know that together you're going to build it into something big. When people get into nitpicky over oh, I need this, or you hear oh, this is a requirement for us, I think when there's no negotiation, it's like a bad sign in my mind. And then I'm always just like, who's the entrepreneur that you've had the worst relationship with? Because like the company went to zero, or blew up, or like the two co-founders fired each other, and like let me talk to them, and I want to see how you interacted with them during that process.
Great.
Can we get a feel on like the stage of the companies that are in the audience? Are people that have product and market? Are you starting to work on an idea? Okay, maybe we'll do like some hands up. How many entrepreneurs have raised money already? Oh, okay.
Maybe we should do reverse start. Okay, wait.
Yeah,
Put your
yeah.
hand up if you're starting or want to start a company. Okay, now keep your hand up. Wait, keep those hands up. Keep those hands if you're starting or want to start a company in the next 12 months. Now, who has actually started building something related to that company? How are there new hands coming up? Now, who has thought about raising money related to that company? Who has actually begun to raise money? So has checks in the bank associated with the first round? Who has raised more than $1 million in the audience? I mean, for a current company. New hands can't come up. Okay, so everyone's, so we have one. So everyone's super early. Okay.
So what Blair just did there is very important because as it relates to the first year of your company and as it relates to figuring out what to build, PG and Y Combinator have a saying which is build something people want. And the trap that you can fall into while following that line of advisory is that you build everything that people want and you don't end up with a product that is scalable to a single point in the market, and it just ends up not being good enough for everyone. It's up to you as the founder of the business to listen to all the feedback and take all those wants from your users and infer them into the needs. And that is what good product development and good product management are. And so the reason why I wanted to know who's in the audience is if we're talking about the things you should watch out for when raising money from investors, and nobody here is at the stage where they should even be talking to investors, because in reality, I don't think it's probably true that you aren't. You should be building, you should be talking to users, you should be scaling your company, because it's too early to raise. And one of the biggest pitfalls I think we all see from new entrepreneurs is that they have an idea and they say, if I could just have a technical co-founder and $1 million in the bank, I would go and execute on this idea. But that's not going to happen, because smart money and investors don't invest in ideas. They invest in people and they invest in execution. And you have to get there first. So I really think we got to focus on that stage and the pitfalls at that stage, not on raising money, because it seems like it's just too early.
So a follow on to one of your earlier questions, you asked about whether you should go out and talk to a customer, go build feature ABC, talk to a different customer, build their features. I think the real trick there is you have to go out and talk to a statistically relevant number of customers. So depending on the type of business, that might be 5 or 10, or it might be 1,000, right? If it's consumer, but try to understand, of the features A, B, and C the customer one's asking for, are 10 customers asking for feature B? And sometimes you might actually get to the point where you only build a product for 5 of the 10 customers you talk to, because they all have the same requirement. But whether it's capital or just time, in the first year operation, you have very limited resources. You need to focus on the thing that's going to get you to the next level.
And I think the really important part about this is don't get lazy about it. If you don't want to get out there and speak to your customers every single day, I think you should have a really hard think about if this is something you want to do. And to give another very specific example, we did one thing in our very first year, which is I tried to call every new client that signed up within 5 minutes. There wasn't that much volume in our first couple months. So, within 5 minutes of them signing up. And that did 2 things. One, it wowed the customer about the sort of aspirational service we were building. Second, it gave me a chance to speak to every new person that was coming in the door and learn about what the experience was like, what worked, what didn't. And I think it's a really powerful thing. And we've implemented something similar now, where every person in the company, which is now 50 people, has to go through a week of customer service every 2 months. And I think a really powerful thing is like making sure that the whole team is in touch with the customers and the problems that you're solving, so that as you scale your business, you never lose touch with that and are always able to adapt to those needs as you grow.
Were you asking why they signed up in the early days?
Yeah, where they signed up, where they heard from us, whether they were planning to actually put in money or just kicking the tires, what would change their decision.
And how did that advise your go-to-market strategy and what you ended up building? Sorry.
I think I think the most important thing we learned about that is if anybody here is a Wealthsimple client, I set myself up for not success with that. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, we got one.
Got one. Okay, well,
I'm
everybody
gonna
sign
ask
up. You
if
get
we
your first 5,000 managed for free. You know, so the thing we learned about through those phone calls was like having a tremendous amount of features that help people invest and understand their investments was not the thing people cared about. What people really cared about was making it as easy as possible to sign up. So signing up for an investment account sucks. You know, in the past, it really did take 50 pages of paperwork. It took you half an hour or weeks, you know, half an hour to sign up and then weeks to move money between accounts. What we found is people just wanted to say, hey, I know this is something I want to do, and I want to be done with it in 5 minutes and never have to think about it again. And so we focused all of our energy on our first year about like making the onboarding experience as frictionless as simple for clients. And I think the only reason we learned about that was by speaking to everybody as they were in the middle of it, you know, learning what parts sucked so that we could go work on making it better.
Sorry, I just think an interesting counter to that is, I was definitely very similar, like how do we make it as easy as possible for someone to get started? We were about simple online selling. And one thing I always found interesting is there's these services out there that people are willing to go through hell to sign up for the service. Like it can be the worst user experience, it can be, you know, a million different steps, but they want what's at the end of the tunnel so badly that they're willing to go through this hellish experience. And part of me thinks that if you can have a service that people are willing to put up with a lot of bullshit just to get the end result, you have something really, really worth building. And I think that in the earliest stages, probably with yours as well, it wasn't as simple as it is today, right? And those early customers that were willing to go through how hard it was in the early days are proving to you that it's worth making it simpler because people really do want what's at the end.
I think from my point of view, this like ABC thing, I think number one, Canadian entrepreneurs are usually very timid people. I think this is something I've seen. I was very timid early on too, and I think, you know, like now if a customer's like, yeah, we'd use it if you build A, B, and C, I'm like, great. So you'll pay the subscription fee and we'll charge you another 150 grand and we'll build ABC. And it'll be 6 months because it's gonna be like 400 hours or whatever it's gonna be. Because like one of the truths of enterprise, and I don't make this all about enterprise, and like you should have a very clear idea if you're building a consumer company or an enterprise company, FYI, but if you're building an enterprise company, like people don't value what they don't pay for. And usually people don't ask people to pay because they lack confidence. That's like the number one driver of pricing flexibility. Like we have on our board a guy who was like the number 2 at JP Morgan, ran all of their retail brokerage, ran all of Chase, and the number one reason they did a study for price flexibility is a lack of confidence. It's like people are like, well, I'd love you to pay 2,000, but like I don't even think this thing's worth 2,000, so like what about 1,000? What about 500? What about 100? And like people walk themselves down because they're like, you pay because I like back to this original point, if people aren't going to pay 2,000, you want to find out that, and you want to find out why, and you want to find out like what's, you know, so being ready to like drop a line and like stand behind that line is like very, very important, especially with early customers.
And to that point, just in the 4 and a bit years that we've been, well actually, it's realistically like 3 years that we've been selling product to market, our ASP, which is our average sale price per year, has gone from about $250 to about $25,000. And it is purely a function of pricing confidence, because when I first went out to market to sell our stuff, I wasn't necessarily confident in what it could do, and so we underpriced it. And then as we went along, we realized we could ask for more money. And then one day in July of 2013, I said, fuck it, I'm going to double the price of everything and see what happens. And people started buying it at a higher rate. We sold more SKUs than we had ever sold before at twice the value just because we doubled the price. And people started to understand that there was more value in the software. It became more sticky, churn became less of an issue, and it was like one of the biggest surprises, I think, in Vidyard's history. So certainly be confident in what you've built and price it accordingly.
The other big thing that drives is management buy-in, right? Like I sell to an enterprise customer, it's like $2,500. Like Joe Blow can approve that out of his expense account. You go in, you're like, this is $2.5 million. It's like, okay, now you got the COO involved, you got like the president involved. Everyone's involved, and they're like, okay, I basically like bet on this. It might take longer, but like we are invested in making this a success now. Okay. Like we're not just gonna buy it and like let it sit on a shelf and like die there.
Kurtis, I'd be interested in your perspective, like who you talk, if you can talk to the audience about who you sell to and how you made those initial sales when you were a small company and maybe didn't have as much credibility as you do now.
Sure, I would not recommend doing what we did. We sell to governments, so as a startup, selling to governments is not a fun time because they might take 2 years to get through a procurement process with you. So what we actually did was we initially started selling to governments, realized we were going to run out of money if we didn't find a way to sell to a government through private channel. So we went and basically found ways where private companies were providing services to the government in some instances, and that was kind of how we survived for the first few years, was to go after the private channels. So one thing I would say is kind of, we talked a bit about price discovery and user discovery. The other one that's important as you kind of get into the market is channel discovery. So how is money actually flowing in the market toward the thing that you're trying to sell them? Like, is it direct sales? Is it through resellers, through service providers? It's really important to kind of map out all the dynamics in the market and then try to figure out what's the best channel that'll get me to revenue quickest or at the highest scale or whatever.
Yeah, I think that, so I would add sort of channel and also so any other types of partnerships, right? Because you might have channel / other types of partnerships. So I'd be interested from other people on the panel who really got their business kick-started through either different channels or different partnerships, and how that worked and things to think about.
Well, maybe I'll comment. OMX actually sells to large government contractors and thousands of small companies. So what we did was we built an advisory panel of some of the big government contractors, and they actually, that you talked about the product development, they actually helped design the product. So I think that's really important too. If you're selling B2B and you're selling enterprise, sure, charge for customization, and we had that where somebody would log in, they'd want some special features, but we had those clients actually develop the product, and there was a lot of tension, but it's good tension when you're trying to figure out what features and where the biggest pain points are. So when you asked earlier, what did you spend your first year doing? My answer to that question was still selling. And so we tried to raise money in the beginning, but we needed more traction. We needed LOIs from all of these big government contractors. And so we were spending a huge part of our first year selling while we were getting them to help us develop the product.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I can talk to that one. So we had, our go-to-market strategy was to sell through agencies and content producers that were essentially making videos for companies and then could justify the ROI of the investment that company had made in their video production services using our analytics. And so we thought that would be a home run because we were an agency that was doing that, and we would sell a video with a guarantee. We'd say 60% of the audience is going to make it to this end of this video, and if they don't, we'll reproduce it, and we'll charge you twice as much to produce that video with a warranty. Turns out agencies back then, more so now, didn't care about the performance of their content. In fact, they didn't want their clients to know that their videos were not performing for the intended purpose, and they assumed that they were. So they knew they were selling snake oil, and they didn't want to justify it. And so our market and our opportunity was essentially doomed. And so then, and this is like a year in, this is after Y Combinator, we met a gentleman named Steve Woods, who's here in Toronto, just started a company called Nudge, who was the CTO of Eloqua. And we met him through an EIR advisor at Communitech named Brett Shellhammer, who's their head of product, and he said, look, you guys have this individual user data on who's watching a video. Eloqua essentially does the same thing for email opens, white paper downloads, and a bunch of other stuff. Video is really cool because you can see how someone's watching that content second by second. So as it attributes to lead scoring, a video view is worth a lot more than a white paper download or an email click. And so we integrated into what Eloqua at that point was calling the App Cloud. And we went to Eloqua Experience. At this point, we probably had a few $100,000 in the bank, and it was a $12,000 sponsorship. There was like 6 people in the company, and we were really worried that we weren't going to hit product market fit, we weren't going to be able to scale this thing, and so we didn't want to spend much money, and so we covered my co-founder's car in Vidyard stickers and drove it down to Orlando and parked it on the lawn at this conference so that everybody could see it with the 4-ways on, and then it got towed, and we'd drive it right back up onto the lawn, and then the keynote speaker was a guy named Jeffrey Hazlett, and we tweeted at him like crazy and got him to go drinking with us the night before his keynote. And so the first thing he said during his keynote the next day was that he was hungover because he was spending all night drinking with the Vidyard boys. And we thought that was going to be a really bad show, but then everybody came by our booth because he talked about us during the keynote, and this was at an 1,800-person conference. And so we literally signed up $50,000 worth of sales at the show, and it wasn't the channel or the partnership that we thought was going to scale for us, but what we were able to do was provide a very specific set of functionality to a customer base that needed it. And we found that through a crazy web of events, and we put ourselves way out there to see if that spend and that investment in technology was actually going to work. And that began our crazy growth cycle, which was a triple until last year and then a fiscal. This year we're still going for a triple. Ideally it's somewhere between a double and a triple to get that kind of IPO magic. But all of that was essentially built on that first partnership. Now, I will say, Eloqua was a very big company compared to us. And the thing you need to watch out for is that big companies do not give a shit about little companies. And the only reason they have these partner programs and these app clouds is to make their customers stickier. They will not give you any resources. They will not sell your product for you until you prove that you can sell it directly on your own. And this is a trap I've seen a lot of B2B companies fall into with Salesforce. No offense to Salesforce, great company, they're an investor. But App Exchange is just that. It's just to improve the stickiness. And they have these ISV reps. Those ISV reps are there to generate more revenue out of App Exchange. They're not there to help you. The sales reps don't give a crap because they're not going to get spiffed. They're not going to make money off of selling your stuff. So unless you have a very unique and high value proposition, they're not going to do anything for you because you're a small company and you can't do anything for them. And they can do everything for you. And so you need to make sure you have that perspective. Don't bet the farm on channels or partners. But if there is a unique value proposition and technology advantage you can provide in that ecosystem, sell it directly and like beat it like a dead horse, because you have to justify that investment before you move on to something else.
I think
we had a similar start, way less exciting market, but similar start where we sell software that automates something that's done with people's time, right? And so we went into the channel and figured like this is going to be great. They're saving money. They're more efficient. But the way that their contracts were all set up with government was that they were basically selling a markup on people's time, right? So it took me 10 hours to do this. I sold through the time. So all of a sudden we come along and they can do the same thing with an hour of time. Even though we were saving them money, and in normal economic circumstances that would have made them more profit, it actually lost them revenue because they couldn't bill through the time of the government. So, you know, great product. They all thought, perfect, we'd love to use this, but we can't because we'll make less money. So we had to go back out and, again, map out that channel and try to understand kind of how to fit it in. The one other thing I wanted to talk about, I think so many times you get up on these panels and you're introduced as like, you know, here's the smartest people in Canada and you should listen to them, they know everything. The reality is, and I'll speak for myself, I want to speak for these guys, but like, we've all fucked up a lot. And like one story I'll tell you, we're sitting up here saying you got to go out, do product market fit, talk to users. Like we raised 150 grand, was the first investment we ever raised. We spent every dollar of it building a product in our basement. We finally went out to customers when we were running out of money and realized we probably should try to get some revenue. And we showed the customer what we had built, and they basically looked at this big long list of features we built, and they were like, I don't know, there's 20 features here, 19 of these are horrible, I would never use them. I think there's one here that's really interesting that I would love to learn more about, but it's so kludged together with all this other stuff that I can't even use it. And so we had to go raise more money, and we basically built one feature, which we probably could have built for 1/20th of the 150 grand in the first place, went back out to market, and that's what became the company. So don't take all of our sage wisdom as we were just born this way. Like we've learned through losing millions of dollars on making terrible decisions.
I think the other thing that's important to realize is it's like it also, you come up here and you do these things and it's as if it was like this elegant solution where you came up with this perfect way of building your product, launched it, and ultimately found a market and grew and it was scaled. But you just heard an awesome story from Michael about hustle. Like drove down, covered a car in stickers, got it towed, came back to the conference, tweeted at the guy, got him out drinking so they got a mention. Like that stuff is not stuff that most people talk about, but is so important actually getting your first product, your first customer, your 10th customer, and those hustle stories of going a step beyond getting out of the basement and just doing something totally different than everybody else that's fighting for space on the shelf and space on kind of the airwaves at these conferences is really important. Yeah. And I think that was a great story.
I think one last thing on partnerships is I'm always like a paranoid survive kind of guy, and I think there's a lot of companies that either willfully or unknowingly will kill you as you try to partner with them, right? Like I remember, when we were raising our first round, we had an investment offer from a strategic, and it was one of our advisors who was like, don't underestimate the probability that a company, would pay $2 million to kill you over losing eventually $200 million in revenues to you. I think there's also a lot of other companies that, people at big companies have to fill their calendar. And there's nothing better to fill their calendar with than meetings with up-and-coming companies. And they'll drag you along for 2 years, and there's a lot of companies who've died on the vine of partnerships with big enterprises. So I think like it's a kind of siren song to be like, oh, well, we're going to partner with this company and get distribution to like 5 billion people. It's going to be amazing. Yeah, 18 years later, when you're still in your mom's basement, unfortunately, with your kids at that point and whatever else, you'll like kind of revisit that. I think there's something was said about building allies. I think one of our investors loves like the Game of Thrones analogy. And he's like, listen, you start this game like, up on the wall in nowhere land, and your whole mission is to like build allies as you work your way south. And like I think it's very, very valuable to get really heavy hitters in the industry that you're in around the table by like doing advisory grants, like structuring it properly, or like getting a small investment fund and doing all these things. Because at the end of the day, companies don't buy products, people buy products, and like people at those companies buy products. So like the more kind of that you can optically manage your business, the better, and like the more people you can have helping you from different angles, the better.
It's so true, though. We spent so much time in the beginning, like trying to get these big partnerships put into place, and we signed them all, and we did press releases, and then nothing came out of them. It was like we should have spent all that time just selling more, building more allies. But
for us,
partnerships are tough.
I was going to say, for us, it was a big partnership with WordPress. Was one of our biggest partnerships that we did. We were the first e-commerce platform to be available on WordPress, and it was like this huge deal for us and our investors and the press, and it was the biggest waste of time that we ever spent in the entire company, because like they weren't selling it through, it didn't really matter. For them, it was just this box that they were checking that they needed to bury somewhere in the feature set. And we just sort of spent all of that time, like you were saying, just actually selling, and that's what we ended up doing afterwards. And we'd wasted so much time on all of these big partnerships.
Legals, right? Like, why are we doing legals? We're not making anything happen here.
Revenue share agreements on things that don't exist yet.
I think it's human nature to look for the path of least resistance. So partnerships feel like that in a way. We're going to get 5 billion people to see our stuff, and we're going to explode, and I'm going to be a millionaire, I'm going to have a big house, a fancy car, and everything's going to be great. But like at this stage, you actually do need to take the path of most resistance, which is, again, full circle, talking to customers and users as often as possible. And for the first year, if you want to break down what I did versus my co-founders, Devin and Ed were 100% focused on building product, and I was 100% focused on getting users and selling it. Even as they were building product and we didn't have anything in market yet, I was still getting people to sign up for the beta when it launched.
We had the exact same split. CTO was doing that, and I was doing the selling, and it was just full time.
And don't waste your time with service providers, which are accountants and lawyers, because those people will suck the life out of you and offer to make, they'll offer to make introductions and stuff to like fancy people and investors, but really they're only doing that because they need that relationship if you're going to get big in the future. And the first thing that happens when you go to YC is they're like, do not talk to any accountants or lawyers. We've got in-house people that will answer any questions you have about this. So find your trusted advisors and don't talk to anyone else, because everybody else, unless they're willing to pay money for your product or sign up and use it every day and give you feedback, is an absolute waste of your time as the business person in your company, which I'm assuming most of you are.
Question, just shifting gears a little bit, I think, can you talk a little bit about co-founders? One of the questions that I often get asked is, hey, if I'm on my own, how do I find a co-founder? And I'd be interested in the experience of the panel in terms of, did you have a co-founder from the beginning? Did you have to find one? How well did you know each other, et cetera?
I don't know if this is exactly the question you asked, but I think like entrepreneurship is really hard. And you will have lots of days where you're emotional, where your co-founder is emotional. I find you have to be prepared to be extremely vulnerable and admit where your own shortcomings are. Like you all have strengths, but you also, trust me, you also have lots of weaknesses. I've always found the teams that I've seen, co-founder teams I've seen that have done the best together are ones where they have offsetting strengths and weaknesses, right? Where, like for me, I'm always chasing the next shiny ball. My co-founder is very pragmatic and grounded and make sure that I at least focus a little bit before you go on to chase the next one. Yeah. But yeah, for me, that's like, you talk about, over 11 years together, we've all done, like I've done development, I've done sales, he's done ops, he's done finance, he's done development, like we've all kind of moved around, but the thing that remains consistent is that sort of yin and yang balance within the co-founder team. So I don't know. For me, that's the most important thing. Is just kind of having some harmony on the team, a balanced
Okay.
co-founder team.
Great.
So I was a single founder. I brought on the first guy I brought on ended up becoming my co-founder, and I really think of him that way. I think the biggest mistake people make is when they co-found companies. At the end of the day, you have to be like, who can fire everyone else? That's the one big mistake they make, because then it becomes we both have 50-50, we can't fire each other, but like blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, what if I want to go right and you want to go left? Does the company just like tear in half as we go each way? I think the other big mistake people make is they assume that because they're friends now, they'll always be friends. And they don't set up the paperwork, they don't do the legal work, they don't get everything. Like, you should be like, listen, if tomorrow we want to murder each other, everything should be clean cut and pristine. If tomorrow, like, you find out that I'm like your sworn blood enemy and you want to like destroy me and this company, it should be like very clear that I make that decision or you make that decision. Here's what the vesting schedule looks like, here's what the cut looks like, here's what everything looks like. And then very clear about roles and responsibilities. It's like, okay, you make all tech decisions, I make all business, or I make all of them, you can or whatever it is.
So that happened twice in Next Gen Dragon's Den. I can't say which ones, but the co-founders actually split up between the time we did a deal on the set and the time we were doing due diligence. So I was in a similar situation. I started the company, but then I basically took all my qualities, and the first hire was the exact opposite of me. And he owns 10% of the company, and it's basically a co-founder situation, but one person has to be in charge.
Any other, Michael?
I mean, yeah, I've been part of 2 startups now. The first was a YC startup that ultimately had a great exit, but the co-founders broke up. And I think what you're hearing is it's a very common occurrence and something you don't hear a lot about when you hear about kind of startup success stories. And it sucks. So I think it's really important to take Blair's advice and understand that these things happen, and to prepare, so that you're not going to screw the company if unfortunately the business does go that route. I think one way to protect against it a little bit, and this is a little bit borrowed from YC, is if you've known someone for a long time, and ideally if you've worked with that person before, I think that makes the best pool of co-founders. I started the business on my own and then brought over a co-founder from the last business who was someone that I'd worked with, and I think the experience of having worked together, being in a highly charged environment, having debated and fought about ideas, about the direction of where to take the business, been like emotionally stressed together, let us know that we were going to make it this time and it was going to be okay because we'd been through that stress before. I think a lot of people make the mistake of they kind of like someone, they maybe knew of someone at the office, had never really been in a situation that tests you, and those could go either way. Unfortunately, I think you hear is they often go one way, which is they don't end up working when they're tested.
And I think that the people that make the biggest mistakes in this area are non-technical people that keep getting told that you have to have a technical co-founder. So they'll basically take the first person who says they can code and like, okay, you're my technical co-founder. And it's under those situations where you haven't worked together that you're going to have the biggest blow up. So how do you find ways that you can sort of date before you get married? Maybe you start working together on contract. Maybe you meet a bunch of times talking about the business and working together before you actually get into that actual co-founder discussion. Even once you do that, make sure that there's vesting. Make sure that you're doing this in a really, really smart way, because sometimes, especially in that non-technical founder situation, there's a sense of desperation. And I think you're best, if you are in that situation, before you even start working on a business, you should be building relationships, you should be working with people, you should go and learn to code yourself, because once you already have the idea, it's kind of no time left to actually build the right relationships.
I give a really quick story about our co-founder experience. So Devin, who's my CTO co-founder, my best friend, he was a registered minister with the Universal Life Church for my wedding with Donna. And so we are very, very close to each other. We just got back from a 9-day road trip in these old shitty cars that we drove from San Francisco that broke down all the time, and we keep that relationship strong because it's very important. There was originally 3 co-founders in our business, and at YC, actually the stat is 62% of the startups, this comes from Jessica in our batch, break up after YC. There's disagreements with finance, there's disagreements with direction. It's just a natural way of being, and so we had a third co-founder that really was interested in going in a different direction from us, in a different location than us. And we ended up having to part ways, and it was a very, very, very difficult situation, but it set me up for all the other difficult situations that we're gonna have, because you will fire people and you will think about the impact it has on their life, but you need to understand that it's for the business, it's better for you, and it's ultimately better for them. And having that co-founder split and going through that scenario really set me up for that long term, because I've had to fire a bunch of senior executives now, and to be honest, it's all been easy compared to parting ways with that co-founder. And the last thing I'll say with respect to being good friends, the three of us were really tight, and when we were raising money out of YC, only one investor said you need reverse founder vesting. So what that means essentially is that you earn your shares over a period of time. They're allocated to you, but you earn them over, ours was a 3-year period of time. And we already owned our shares and thought that we were entitled to them. And so we pushed back and almost did not do that deal on the basis of needing reverse founder vesting. 6 months later, we wanted to terminate a co-founder, and thank God we had that reverse founder vesting, because I would not be sitting here if we did not have that allocation or did not have that built into our employment agreement. So, to Blair's point, make sure you button all this shit up before you get married, because it is a marriage. I spend more time with Devin than I do with my wife, Donna. That's just the nature of running a company, and so you got to make sure that relationship is solid. There's got to be that yin and yang existence. I got to finish his sentences, he's got to finish mine, and we have to be going in the same direction all the time. So, keep it tight.
Okay. What about generally building the team? I mean, again, you start with maybe you and your co-founder. I'm curious who your first hire was after that.
I can jump in as we all look around. I think teams evolve at each phase. I think, we're a B2B company, so we're like on the higher end of, non-engineering roles. Obviously, if you're a consumer, for probably the first few years, you should have 95% engineering. I think, basically it's just like horsepower. And horsepower, like if you're building, again, this is all tech company focused. I don't know if this whole panel is supposed to be tech company focused, but if you're building tech, like you need builders. And I think, largely for the first 10 people, 8 out of 10 should be engineers. It should be like, maybe like a CEO business focused person, one person to support them, whether it's success or support, sales, marketing, whatever that kind of hybrid-esque role is, everyone else engineering.
And how can you get great people when you're a young company, and so you probably pay less and offer less stability?
Great technical leader. That's like the be-all, end-all.
Yeah, Devin was a great technical leader. Our VP engineering was a classmate and a friend who's also a great technical leader. And so we just really worked through our friends and peer groups being engineers from the University of Waterloo. That made that a lot easier for us. We were 100% product people. First 4 hires were product people. The 5th was a video producer, because we were still selling video production. We didn't want to outsource it anymore. And then the 6th was essentially an SDR or a BDR. So I was taking every inbound call or every inbound lead. It's actually, I keep talking to my wife, Donna. She's very tied into the business. It's actually how I met her, because she was one of our first customers and kept having issues with the product and kept calling support and kept talking to me and thought that it was, I remember being at the end of YC, cleaning puke off the carpet at a party and talking to her on a support call and being like, I'm gonna need to meet you when I'm in Waterloo, because I can't handle this over the phone. And that's how we met. Anyways, when the volume got too high for me to handle the inbound and closing the accounts that we could, we hired an individual with sales experience to take those inbounds and do outbound prospecting and then hand off the deals to me, because I was the account executive. And then eventually we hired someone for him to do that, and he became the account executive with me. And then slowly we built up the sales team that way, so I was able to pull out and act more as a sales leader, VP sales in that way. So yeah, absolutely start with product. I think in any company, you gotta be able to build the stuff that you identify you need to build from having those conversations as quickly as possible.
But I think it's just, again, back to the technical lead. I think it's like, put yourself in the shoes of like the number 3 hire. No, and as much as we all, especially on the technical side, would love to be like, the 23-year-old Mark Zuckerberg, unfortunately, like engineers come into a team and they're basically like, how much growth opportunity do I have, and how smart are these people? And so it's like better to get like a more senior, experienced technical hire if you can. And if they're not senior and experienced, and like obviously the one thing that overrides all of this is like close, deep relationships. But if you can't find that, like just go as heavy hitter as possible and beware of the CTO who says like, I don't code, but I manage. We ran into like 3 of those and it's awful.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't be afraid with, like equity is a big thing that people are like, I own 100% of this idea. And so I'm gonna bring in a technical co-founder, I'm gonna give them 2% of it. The reality is 98% of nothing is diddly squiddly shit. And so you gotta be able to to grant them 20, 30, 40, even 50% if it's a senior enough person to get them invested in the idea, because otherwise it's just not going to work. And I see that time and time again. So don't be afraid to split your company up with someone who you think can help you make it to the big leagues.
Yeah,
I think, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the one warning on the, sort of building the technical team is not to scale too quickly, right? Like we talked about having all of these conversations early and making sure you're building the right thing first. Number one reason that companies fail is that they scale too quickly, meaning it's like, okay, we think we have the right thing, let's go hire 8 developers, we're going to spend all this money, we're going to build it, only to realize you've spent $150,000 and you built the wrong thing, right? How do you keep going after that? So make sure you've had those early conversations, you have those sales before you actually take that leap.
I had to echo what Katherine said. Our split was the opposite. I think we had 3 developers and 10 salespeople. So I think it just depends on your business, but we focused a lot more on sales because our industry is pretty slow moving. So we knew that if we brought the new features to market 2 months later than we could have with double the developers, it wasn't going to kill us. So I think it depends.
The only other thing I would add here is don't settle when you're hiring. A lot of people do know the adage, hire fast, fire fast, or hire slow, fire fast. I actually prefer the hire slow and fire fast. The reality is if you've never been in a position where you've had to fire people, you have no idea how hard it is. And a lot of people mess this up. So the people that you hire early end up sticking around for a long time, whether or not they're a fit. And that's why it's so important to get it right up front or to be really good at letting people go when it's not a perfect fit. So don't settle for those early people. They're going to have a huge impact on the culture, the product, everything that you're kind of putting out in the first while.
Okay, Kurtis?
What I was going to say is, for me, culture fit is everything. I think whether you're hiring developers first or salespeople first, that's going to largely just be dependent on your market, your product, your strategy. But for me, as early as you can, really try to document what is the culture. In other words, what are the personalities of the types of people you're going to let into the company, because ultimately that becomes the personality of the company. And we're a bit nutty, as I know at least one guy on the stage also is a bit nutty about making sure that you get the right types of people into the company, because that'll kill or make your company getting that part right.
Great. Okay, thanks. Now we're going to open it up to questions. So I think there's microphones, I guess 2 microphones here. So what I would encourage anybody who has a question to line up at one of the 2 microphones, and we'll call on you. So yeah, and feel free, you can either address the panel or anybody individually.
Things you have with the lights at the top.
Thank you. I think my question addresses all of you guys because you had a successful company. My question is at the time when you're scaling, and I know that you have to make hard decisions every day. Where do you go to after, to get the support? Because some of you were a sole founder or a co-founding team, but at the end of the day, being a founder is just very lonely. And when you're scaling, you constantly have to hustle, make decisions, and hire the right people, go for investment, go for sales. So where do you get the other support that you need? Is it the advisory board? Is it friends, families?
For me, it was a network of other entrepreneurs that ended up being the most valuable thing for me. There's, I think all of my friends while I was running the company were basically other founders at different stages of running their businesses, and it was always just such a comfort when you're having your down day to be able to go to someone who had been through that a year ago or 2 months ago and sort of help you through that. And you can do the same for them when they're in similar situations. So there's great networks here in Toronto of founders at different stages. Nicole and I were actually part of a group of female founders that got together for dinner every couple months, and that was a huge help, I think, for
wine.
Yeah, wine. And that was a huge help, I think, for us as well. So those groups were so valuable to me when I was building the company.
I'm actually from Montreal, so I can't access the Toronto.
Sorry, the mic was off for a second.
Oh, sorry. I was telling how to build that support group because, you're saying in Toronto it's a bigger community. In Montreal, it's not as big.
Yeah, so for us, let's say the group that Nicole and I were part of, it started off with 3 people going out to dinner, and then dragging in 2 others and dragging in 3 more and then 5 more, and all of a sudden you had a group which turned into a mailing list. And I think it's just finding those people that are at similar stages, maybe a little bit ahead of you, bringing them together, and once you find that chemistry, growing it. And I think that's how a lot of the networks end up starting. And really, it's just a group of friends. It's nothing formal, but it's people that you know you can go to and that have seen your other parts of your story, so you're not filling people in on everything every single time you go to see them.
And in Montreal, I think you said you're from Montreal, there's actually a very strong startup community there in the city and all sorts of events that you could get plugged into.
I try to do 3 breakfasts a month. I'll do a breakfast with someone who's further along than me up here, and then someone who I can teach something to. And I find like I get something out of all 3 of those. Like even the ones where you're teaching, I find it helps to crystallize the thought in your head when you're having to articulate it. So I've done that for years, and I found it's a good way to build a network and a good way to learn.
Okay, we'll go over to this microphone.
Hi, Chanakya from Sweat Free Apparel, and you might remember me. But my question is more regarding employee motivation. So right now we've had a good trend where things are going well, but like I'm worried if there's a downward trend, then like the employees are used to like the upward thing. So any tips on like when things started to fail, how you guys kept your co-founding team, your executives, or your employee motivated?
My company's never done anything but this. So I think it's like, again, it becomes like a matter of like, you know, whether it's external or internal motivation, right? Like people should be there because they, number one, believe in the mission. They, you know, want to work at the company, and, you know, they want to build something big for economic and non-economic reasons. Like I think one of the hardest things, and this question actually really ties back into the last question, it's because a lot of the times when, you know, shit's hitting the fan, as it were, as a CEO, you can't actually convey that back to the team. You kind of, you know, people talk about support groups, but this is one of the reasons that startups break a lot of people, is because there is no support group, right? Like you kind of have to bear the burden and walk with it. So, you know, like we were at a time before our last round, we had like a month and a half of cash in the bank. And it's like, did I tell people? No. Did I, Vola? And like the thing is like, you know, you kind of gotta, you know, bear the burden and kind of go forward. It's a hard balance because on one hand you need to be proactive, and if you see that there's like no light at the end of the tunnel, you need to take action. But on the other hand, like you gotta like smile, bare your teeth, and kind of go with it.
The other thing that I've seen that works quite effectively is as the CEO, if you say, hey, you know what, we're on this path, and there's going to be ups and downs, and we know that everything we do is not going to be effective, it's not going to work, and we're going to have some downs, we're going to have some failures, but we're going to learn from them, and we're going to pick ourselves up and go again. If you set that culture, then when you have one of those down moments, right, when you don't meet that quarter's or that month's sales objective, everybody sort of says, oh, okay, yeah, I understood that this was happening, it's okay, let's just work extra hard and meet it next month, versus getting into that downward spiral of doom.
We talk a lot about core purpose, and I think that's essentially what you're referring to, is like by talking about core purpose at every town hall, every month with staff, you know, whether you're having a good month or a bad month, the purpose is still there. You know, keeping with the theme of Game of Thrones, like sometimes the White Walkers are attacking you, but if you're Jon Snow, like you got to protect that wall. That's your purpose, right? And your troops will rally to it. So just get out ahead of it. Just talk about, you know, don't talk about what you're doing today. Talk about why what you're doing means something 10 years from now, and a bad quarter doesn't matter.
And you focus on another small win, right? Like I'm a believer in lots of small wins. So I think you can always find another one somewhere.
Okay.
Right, thank you.
Okay, over to you.
No.
Thanks, guys.
No.
Hey, I'm Max. I have a mobile travel visa company. So you guys talked about funding partnerships and platform partnerships and channel partnerships. What about service partnerships? How do you decide which services to deliver in-house and which ones to outsource?
Services to deliver?
How do you decide which services to deliver through partnerships with the white label service, or which ones to actually take in-house and deliver yourselves?
Like, are you talking about from a product standpoint?
Yeah, what does your company do?
Yeah, we do travel visas. So we have to partner with a lot of firms that would do, you know, immigration services and stuff like that. Have you guys experienced anything like that where you have a service you can't do in-house?
We do a little bit of services, and the lens that we look at that through is if we're doing this service, will it increase more engagement on our platform itself and increase the value of the platform, then we'll do it. But we usually outsource most of that kind of stuff.
My general rule is if it's really, really, really hard to do one thing really well, so if other people are already doing it well, don't do it yourself. Like just outsource it, right? Like just focus on the thing that you can uniquely do well.
It depends what it is though. If it increases the scope of the contract you're on, that sort of thing, that's the experience we found.
So yeah, our services we're video production, and when the product started to scale, we're like, all right, we're not going to do any video production at all and just focus on scaling this product, and then outsource all that work to agencies that can also resell our technology. So there's a bit of a win-win there.
I think our acid test is always, does this let us keep the user experience? If it does, then like it's great. Anything that gets in between us and the user, we would never outsource.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay, great. Over to you.
Hi, my question is for those with co-founders. So I'm on my second startup, and my first startup I was a solo founder, so I never had the conversation around equity. And at what stage do you build that paperwork out, and how did you decide how much equity to give your CTO, for example, who would be my my co-founder in my next business?
Yeah.
Yeah, as early as possible.
What was that?
As early as possible.
Yeah.
You should do nothing else until that is done. Like,
Yeah, we're
no
sort of
product.
dating right now. We're not married yet, so.
And I think the important thing to remember is you should take care of it now. Don't forget, there are things that you can build into a contract to protect you if it doesn't work out. So if you're confident you're going to go in with this person as your co-founder, even if you split it 50-50, like Michael talked about, reverse vesting and other mechanisms that you can use to make sure that if it doesn't work out, you're all going to be protected at the end of the day.
Yeah, I recommend giving them as much as they need to be completely committed to it and have you feel comfortable with how much you've given them. That's like a sliding scale and is going to be part of the conversation, but put a 4-year reverse vesting clause in with a 1-year cliff. So like they have to make it to that 1 year, and if they don't and you ultimately decide to part ways, it's no skin off your back, you can find somebody else.
Okay. And I'd love to talk with you about Y Combinator if you have some time after.
Sure.
Okay.
We're interested in applying for that, so.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, do it. Yeah. That's really all there is to say.
Okay, over to you.
Hi, so I'll start by saying thank you. Probably, is the best panel I've been to in the last 2 days, so congrats.
Woo!
I'm really early stage, very related to the last question. So I agree that we should be solidifying everything in writing. Where do you go to do that? And how do those conversations look like if you run into a wall? Like we're 50-50, but if we're not really drawing the line between our roles and responsibilities, how do you get past that? And then I guess my second question is as you get traction, or don't rather, is it okay to pivot, and when do you abandon an idea and say, you know what, whether it's with the same co-founder or start something new, just kind of switch gears because it's not kind of growing as fast as you want it to?
So let me unpackage that a little bit. So the first question was around how do you structure the agreement between you and your co-founder?
Yeah, like resources, where do you go, who can you get mentorship from to do that?
Who incorporated your business? And
we're pre-incorporation. Like we were just like, okay, let's go 50-50. We've actually talked to people, user feedback. We haven't done anything official, so like that's like the next step.
James Smith, yeah. Yeah, you should talk to a guy named James Smith.
Okay. That's very specific. I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, he's like the startup lawyer. Sorry for any other lawyers in the audience if you're not James Smith, but he's
How many
he's
people
in
on this panel use James Smith?
yeah.
Or Chad.
I just want to make sure don't talk to accountants. Lawyers are okay.
Well, the big thing is
No, you just need one good lawyer.
He's the non-lawyer lawyer though.
But what a good venture lawyer will do is they're basically betting on future clients. So they'll be like, hey, I like you, you came referenced by someone I like, we'll give you $3,000 in credit, so you don't pay anything until some future milestone or until you pass $3,000. So in corporations, like $500. So basically you get $3,000 of work for free before you have to start paying it off. Because he's like, listen, you go defunct, whatever. But like us, like he just did our last financing, he made like 50 G's. So like, it's great for him.
You overpaid.
Yeah.
You gotta negotiate.
I think also part of your question, if I heard you, was like, what happens if you and your co-founder can't come to agreement in terms of the equitable split?
Not even the equity portion, but like responsibilities. Like you want 2 people being CEO, or like stuff like that.
No, you don't want two people to be the CEO.
My point is, if you run into that, like, you want to
never,
walk away.
never.
BlackBerry.
There's one person in charge.
Well, that's my point. So, like, have you guys had experience walking through that and running through those problems?
I don't
Is
think
it
there's,
easier to
I don't
just
think
give
there's
up and
magic
like part
sauce
ways?
to that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what you got to figure out, how to work with this guy, how to make those sorts of decisions. That's the magic you're going to have to figure out with him.
And the problem is, right now you're arguing over like nothing. There's no enterprise value whatsoever, right? And so like if he's like, oh, I want 30% of this, like if that's what it is, that individual, he or she, is cashing that check before it's been made, and that's like a bad sign because it's not going to be easy. And 2 years from now, there's still going to be no enterprise value potentially, and that person will be gone. So it might not be the right person.
I'm just going to switch my last part.
Wait, I'm going to add one thing. I think if you walked into a presentation with a customer or investor and you were like, hey, we're the co-CEOs of a two-person company, they'd be like, and I have this call I have to take, sorry.
Hi, Mom.
Like,
Happy
I
birthday.
think it's like basically the default for splitting a company is 50-50. If you're like, we can't agree on who's more valuable, let's go 50-50. And if you can't do that, like I would say, like it's an accident waiting to happen either now or in the future, and you guys should just do your own thing.
Yeah, and I guess here's my last quick 10-second question. I like the idea of protecting yourself against shark investors. What about the naivete you bring to the table as both being new? Like, how can you learn really quickly about what to draft, who to talk to, and like?
I actually have a VC that I've never taken money from, that I've kept in close contact with over the years. And anytime I get a term sheet that I don't quite understand, whether it's good or bad, I just give it to him. And I've deliberately never taken money from these guys so that I have this like open relationship where they'll just tell me, yeah, they're screwing you, or yeah, this is reasonable. So I'd find somebody in your network that you don't want to take their money, but you respect them.
Or a good lawyer, like say a James Smith.
Yeah.
He would tell you this is market.
I hope there's only one. I'm going to get the wrong one, obviously.
There's a lawyer sitting in the front here. You can try him too.
Yeah,
it's
Buy Catherine's book.
LW Labarge Weinstein.
Yeah. But also Venture Deals is a fabulous book.
Is that Brad Feld?
Brad Feld, Jason Mendelsohn.
Venture Deals.
It's like it's Venture Deals, how to outsmart your lawyer.
Don't forget, you're not doing any of this for the first time. Like, do your research online. Go to Y Combinator's website. They list very standard, very founder-friendly term sheets. Start there. There's you don't have to recreate the wheel on this. There's a lot of great information.
Just use off-the-shelf agreements.
But don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Don't even think about it until the money finds you.
Yeah.
Until you're no longer co-CEOs.
Okay, over to this side.
Hi, I'm a young kind of aspiring entrepreneur. I've done a few things when I was younger, under the table, made some money, and now I'm trying to do the paperwork side of it. And I'm just wondering if you can give me advice on either books or just kind of habits, the mindset to become a successful entrepreneur.
Did you say you did stuff under the table?
No, I did not.
Yeah.
So you're a drug dealer and now
No, just labor, things of that.
I used to sell firecrackers illegally.
Yeah?
I none of that income ever went to the CRA. So I get it. I don't know. I think you need to talk. I think you need to talk to a lawyer. I would say, so if you're trying to go straight, if that's where I get it.
Essentially.
I think. I think you need to talk to a good lawyer, like a James Smith, because all this stuff is very cookie cutter. Like the way you incorporate a business isn't really complicated. In fact, you can do it yourself. There's a ton of online resources for it.
I've done business plan, and I'm just kind of not stuck. I'm just kind of unfamiliar with the next stages.
From the business plan forward?
Yeah, I guess like the the technical side. I guess actually implementing it. I was just wondering if you can give me like books, things like that, or even just general advice.
Yeah. Go to codecademy.com and run through their tutorials.
Okay.
Yeah, those guys were in my batch, and you can within a day you'll be able to build up a website and start to kind of learn the implicits. And that's important because inevitably if you're going to hire a technical co-founder to build a business with, having a baseline knowledge of how to write code, especially front end, back end stuff, is going to help you vet out their skill set, and you'll understand what they're talking about.
there's some great full-time and part-time boot camps in the city as well. So whether it's HackerU or Lighthouse Labs or BitMaker, they have some great programs that you could actually learn to code in person. They're like 3 months. You can go through them pretty quickly. Lean Startup is a great book that sort of brings together business and building product a little bit. And Venture Deals if you want to actually learn a bit more about the venture side.
Okay.
There's also a
Get
group.
funded. And, yes, and my book funded.
Also a group called the Founder Institute that I've been pretty impressed with recently. It's local.
Okay. Great. Okay.
There's one earlier now. I think there's one in Toronto too.
Hey guys, I'm just wondering, I'm working on a kind of my next generation social media idea right now, and I was wondering how important is it to you guys as individuals and business owners to have a story and to be able to have that story heard?
Sorry, can you repeat the
So
last
to
part?
have what?
To have your story heard. So for example, your story about the car, right? About how you guys drove it up. How important do you guys feel it is to have a story behind your business and to be able to have that story told to your audience? And
yeah, I can take it really quickly. Storytelling has been like the most important thing that I have done. When you hire people, you storytell. When you raise money, you storytell. When you sell product, you tell stories. The founding story of our business is something that I could
Pick up your wife on a
tell in my
support
sleep.
call.
Yeah, when you, yeah, like the fact that my wife was our first customer is a story that like you all know now, and that's just a story, but it's a true story. And as you tell it, you understand, and you can read people's body language, and people want to hear stories. They want to be entertained, right? They don't want this drab, you know, I'm a social network for dentists pitch. Not that that's what you're doing, but it could be. They want to know why you're doing that, right? Are you a dentist and you really wanted to connect with another dentist, and you realize that through doing that, you were able to like create this bond and grow your client list, and that resulted in this much more revenue for you. And then you met your wife because you were pulling out her tooth and like it hit you in the eye. And there's all these aspects of storytelling that I think are super important. And there's actually a really good book that someone random told me to read called Story. And it's about how to write screenplays and how to tell stories and how you like arch up to an apex and really pull people in. And I think that's actually a really good book for startup founders to read because again, it all comes down to storytelling.
I just read that a couple years ago too. But the other story to think about is the narrative about your user base and why this is going to change their lives. And it sounds kind of cheesy, but that's another narrative that you want to make sure you nail.
for sure.
Are you asking because you're building a storytelling social network?
This is
I
true.
don't know what that means, but
And I'm wondering, one more quick question is, with a story, how easy or difficult do you guys feel it is to actually tell your story on social media nowadays with Twitter, LinkedIn, and that kind of stuff? Do you guys feel it's difficult, or do you guys feel it's quite easy to get your story out there?
Oh, you're doing the thing.
Customer research.
yeah.
Oh.
Now it clicks.
Yeah.
I think it could always
with your
be easier.
experiences that you guys have had.
Like,
There's a lot of noise in social media, right? So I think that's the big problem.
I think the best place to tell our company's story actually has been LinkedIn, because you can now do kind of like these short form essays, and there's a huge audience, and the distribution's already there because you might have like thousands of connections that it'll kind of show up in their feed.
Because there's connections, right? There's people there that are going to listen.
Sorry?
I said there's people there that are going to listen. That's why LinkedIn, you think, is effective?
Yeah, like the interesting thing about telling a story is you obviously need an audience, right? And there's a lot of great stories out there that just never got an audience. I mean, Wattpad is full of that to some degree, right? And I think Wattpad worked early on, but now it's such a long tail where you might have a really good story and no audience, and it'll never bubble up because their algorithm just isn't built.
It's actually called Bubble.
Yeah.
Sorry?
It's actually called Bubble.
It's called Bone?
Bubble.
Bubble.
Your
Boning?
business.
Yes.
Your business.
Okay.
Oh, Bubble. Cool.
Okay.
Cool.
You know what? I think just in the interest of time, we'll move along just because I'm watching the time and I want to make sure we get to everybody's question. So do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Anna, I'm the founder of a company called Breezy. I wanted to ask to take you guys back to kind of the early days when you were still doing the direct selling to businesses, and you were still below that your first 10 deals threshold, but you got your first few big wins that are significant customers. You get really excited about them, and you put an aggressive sales plan in place. You get everyone to start looking at scaling the first few wins. looking at patterns that worked, right? And at that point, say you hit some conversations that seem to be customers that are not so positive about what you're doing. And they might, it seems like people that you may or may not actually want to work with. But you're in this aggressive stage where you really need the deal flow to come in. So any tips to share on your experiences around kind of that stage and how you made the decision to either walk away from those sales conversations or, suck it up and get that business done?
So there's a great book called Crossing the Chasm. And one of the things you have to understand about, especially if your product is a new concept you're introducing in the market, markets don't adopt all at once. They tend to adopt in cohorts. So your first few sales might be early adopter prototypes, right? So customers that are forward thinking that take what you're doing and they see how it's going to help transform their business, right? They don't mind the change. But the next conversations you might be having are with the more late adopter, like mainstream or laggard adopter types. So it's a great book to read, and it'll give you a bit of a. I remember early on I'd have similar things, and once I read that book, you could just start like compartmentalizing the conversations you're having. Like, oh, this guy's a late adopter. I shouldn't waste my time on him. We'll come back to him in 2 years, and then just seek out the early adopter types.
Right, so you just
I think you should absolutely be ready to fire clients. Like, it's one of the hard things is everyone's like, oh, any client is a good client to us. It's like, no, that's false. Like people who, don't have budget, take too long to make decisions, like want tons of customization, it's like fire all those people. Because that's the big thing. It's like crossing the chasm. Only 15 to 25% of the conversations you have should be like qualified customers. Just because of like stage in the cycle, propensity to buy, whatever. So you should absolutely not be trying to close 100% of the meetings you take.
Yeah, I would also caution though that they might be telling you stuff that you should be listening to as it relates to building something people want. Like they're telling you what they want, and you're going to have to take all that feedback and infer what they actually need and deliver something. And whether that's a subset of what they're asking for, I mean, it probably is. And when you deliver that subset, say this is what we're building because this is what you need, and be confident in the delivery of why they need this.
Right.
And then if they're still screaming and whining, then you fire them.
Yeah, I'm just talking about objections like price and support and the amount of resources they're actually going to give us. Because back to your point, Michael, it's, big businesses don't care about small businesses, and it's about getting through that to the big businesses that want to support you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, over to you.
Hi, my name is Connor. Thank you all for your time. My question is a broad one for the full panel. And I'm wondering, what are some of the areas, some of the spaces, some of the technologies that you think are the greatest opportunities today that are not receiving the attention that maybe you feel that they should be receiving? Or to phrase it differently, if you were to start from scratch tomorrow and start a new company, what would that company be? And as kind of a follow-on to that, what would be your first week or month of actions to start that new company?
So one of the investors we work with, they look at 3 industries. It's kind of like their big 3, which is government, healthcare, and finance. So I think like those are 3 that, starting the next Facebook is probably not going to work well for you. Like I think all big businesses are built with ecosystem shift, right? So like the shift from desktop to mobile, from like maybe mobile to VR will be the next one, who knows? Like I think those 3 are great sectors. They move really slowly, which is why not a lot of innovations happen there. It's definitely a lot of opportunity. If it was like, if tomorrow, Street Contxt got sued by every government agency in the world and like went to zero, I would just spend time just taking that first week and just talking to people about that industry, that area, like just conversations, discussions, any expert I could meet. I think people jump too quickly into the doing and not quickly enough into the like exploring, planning, and discussing. So that would be me.
Are you on the investing side of the world or the founding side of the world, entrepreneur?
So I work for a company. We provide advisory services to incubators, accelerators, other innovation enablers. And I've started a few companies as well in the past.
What's the name of the company that advises accelerators and incubators?
So we're called the Evidence Network.
The which?
The Evidence Network. And we've got a really cool booth out in front.
What gives the Evidence Network credibility to advise accelerators and incubators?
Thank you very much for asking that question.
I'm just curious.
Our company was founded by a professor at the University of Waterloo who's done a ton of very applicable research on the evaluation and impact assessment of innovation enablers. We have a methodology that is very specific to those sorts of organizations. And then our other co-founder has managed CMC Microsystems and a variety of other organizations in that space. So they bring kind of the practical and the academic side together. My background is economics, so and working a lot on building out their product offering and their research methodology.
What's the most successful incubator accelerator that the Evidence Network has advised?
We work with Communitech, Wavefront, BCIC, Invest Ottawa.
Okay, cool. Interesting.
Okay. Okay, just in the interest of time, we have 6 minutes and 6 minutes and 2 questions left. So why don't you guys go?
Sure. So my name is Lior. I'm the founder of Go Give Back. And my question is, how did you acquire those very first customers, whether it was just a lot of cold calls or you had some interesting kind of strategies you put in place that might not be scalable? And from those, and this might be more to Wealthsimple, so once you did get those customers, how did you actually get them to use it? So once they're actually on board to actually go and use what you have?
Yeah, I think our acquisition strategy, customer acquisition strategy, has changed a lot over the last 18 months. And I think, again, not that we're all just Y Combinator fan boys and girls here, but in the early days, I think in particular, you have to do things that don't scale. And so for us, one of the most important channels that we discovered that we never thought was going to work was events. And probably the first 500 clients we got, at least 50% of them by going into companies and doing lunch and learns, where we just talked to the employees about the basics of smart investing. It was a very soft pitch. It wasn't even about Wealthsimple. We found that 20% of the people that would show up to these events, whether or not it was with 5 people or 500 people, would sign up for the service. That chance to just build credibility face to face, actually help sign people up at the end of the event, was our way of getting our first, hundreds of customers. And so I think, that worked for us, may or may not work for other companies. Right. I think you've got to always be testing and experimenting all sorts of different channels till you find ones that work. And do things that don't scale and don't be afraid about that. I think, early days, it's about just getting people in the door so you can learn, and then you'll figure out what channels are going to scale after that.
We used to go to shows just like this. Actually, 5 years ago, we were at OCE Discovery, and we wore our Redwoods Media t-shirts, which was our content production company. We pitched every single booth on content production services, and we came away with probably 10 follow-ups that ended up resulting in 2 contracts. But we would do that all the time, and we'd put ourselves out there, and to the point of doing things that don't scale, it was absolutely vital. But it turns out events are great ways of meeting huge clusters of people, and we were in an industry where every single exhibitor here could have been a customer of ours. And so if you can find a high density of potential customers, aka a company where there's a lot of people interested in managing their wealth, that's where you want to be. And if it meets that criteria, invest in it, spend time in it, get yourself out there, because you can, in the course of a day, I would have like 150 to 200 pitches, and by the end of the day, I would have it nailed, and I would know exactly what I was going to say. I'd write it down, and then that would be my calling script for the next week.
And also, if you do decide to pursue that, don't be afraid to try and stand out. Like, again, the hustle story. Our last business, one of our products was an app that turned phones into photo scanners. We went to conferences where we'd buy old school Polaroid cameras that, would take these amazing old paper photographs for people at these, mommy blogging conferences. And when we pull out our app, show them how it could scan the photo and create like a conversation piece with people. And I think like little things that you can always do to make yourself stand out and have a great, time with these sorts of things.
Thank you.
Okay.
How y'all doing? Mark Ashley with the Boeing Company. Not really talking about startups, but we do a ton of business in Canada. $1.5 billion a year. I wish I could say I could buy one of all your stuff, but I'm not a buyer. We do very well with industry in Canada, defense, aerospace specifically. We also do a lot of business with universities doing research and that kind of stuff. One of the areas that we want to grow and we want to get better at is working with SMEs and potentially startups. I'd be interested, not necessarily now because we're out of time, but Nicole has my card and I'll give you a card, on what a company like Boeing could do to get more engaged with SMEs and startup. We do things like in-kind support. An example I'll give you is we have engineers working with the Callaway company right now, and they're designing new golf clubs. And the golf clubs are more aerodynamic, and they allow a general golfer to swing faster because they go through the air faster, and a golfer can hit the ball 50 yards further with this club. We also do a partnership with Fiat Racing, where we're teaching Fiat how to do composites, and Fiat's teaching us how to do rapid prototyping. because they can build a new car in a week. We take a zillion years to build a new airplane. So we're looking at how do we, and Mike, I don't know what a super constellation is or something, whatever you're part of.
Oh, the supercluster.
Yeah.
I think that's been renamed to the corridor. That's just basically the Kitchener-Waterloo and Toronto region as a supercluster of innovation companies.
Okay, I mean, see, things like that are something that I'd like to meet. It'd be nice to meet some of those companies to see what they're doing and then how we might be able to interface with them, help them develop something, pay for something they're
You should
So
do
quick-
like a jet share.
Yeah, you want to give everybody a jet. I think, listen, there's actually a lot of great examples out there of big corporate companies that are trying to engage the startup community right now.
Sure.
All of the banks are really great examples. They always come out to startup events. They've set up startup incubators, at Mars, at Communitech, at, I think your best place to start would probably be hooking up with other like-minded individuals at big corporate companies that are doing this sort of thing, understanding what's working and some of the strategies they've used to engage the community.
So really quickly, Communitech has a corporate innovation model where Canon, TD, I think Morgan Stanley are there now, GM, big manufacturers, Canadian Tire, essentially set up an outpost. They hire someone to lead it, and they hire in engineers that are involved in the community to work on innovative technologies to disrupt their businesses. And it's been actually very productive for a lot of the bigger banks who are doing interesting stuff in blockchain. So I'll grab your card and I can introduce you to those folks because it's there's been some really great success stories coming out of that, and it's how they're funding themselves now.
And I can also help you with some introductions.
We need some really great success stories.
One final thought. I think the other area where you guys could help is my opinion is the venture model in Canada is broken. Venture capital in Canada doesn't think big enough and it thinks too short term. I'd love to see some of the big Canadian companies step up and bring a different venture model to the market.
Yeah, and as you know, that's what the offset policy, that's how it's evolved, to try to incentivize more investments in VC, but to bring small startups along into your global value chains, because obviously Boeing is selling lots of products in every country around the world.
A sell to Boeing from a startup is tough.
Okay.
We don't want to be the first to buy from anybody.
The other thing I've seen other big government contractors do is encourage their subs and their subs to engage the startup
We try to do
communities.
that too. But the fact that we could maybe fund some of these startups to get better or teach them something to make them better. We're talking about maybe opening a brick and mortar, a couple floors on a building in Toronto where we can bring companies in and teach them how to sell to Boeing, how to sell to the U.S. government, how to get approved so they can sell to Boeing and that kind of stuff. That's one way of doing it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. That's about all the time we have for today. I really appreciate the panel's insight as to the pitfalls and challenges of growing a business. I think it was probably really appreciated in terms of your frankness that not everything goes smooth sailing in the early years. And I especially liked your comment about watching out for those terms, because we all know that what shows up in a term sheet looks pretty nice, but then when it converts into a subscription and a shareholders agreement, those terms are pretty foreign to early stage entrepreneurs, and a lot of it has huge implications down the road with respect to their economic return once that company is a success. So please join me in thanking our panelists for being here today. We know it's a busy time for all of you, and we have a small gifts to thank you and show our appreciation. And the session is closed, and just like to remind everybody that the luncheon starts at noon in, I believe it's Hall F. But thanks for joining us in this pretty dynamic and informative session.